overcome. Yes, we can.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
What the f*** is wrong with you?
Chip Franklin with you here for What the Franklin. Better late than never. Appreciate you here, though. This is a big day. We have a lot going on. I want to get to this right away. I don't know if you've been seeing Elon Musk's tweets, but his latest tweet says prosecute Fauci. And nothing makes me more livid than to see this, because I hear idiots say this all the time. We're going to get to that. We'll also talk a little bit about social media and its effect on teenagers. I was reading an article about Ted Cruz's kid, and just it's heartbreaking. But it's obviously very, very, it's almost epidemic. These young kids with all this social media, what is it doing to their brains? A little bit later on, we'll talk about the end of crypto, or is it maybe a new beginning? And then Brittany Griner and her exit from Russia back to the United States. How hard will it be for her? What kind of PTSD will she have? And apparently there's some people who think she could have a really tough time. So we'll get to all that. Joining us right now is Dr. Art Kaplan. He heads up the Division of Bioethics at New York University's Langone Medical Center. And I always appreciate his presence here. It always makes me feel safe when I ask these questions. Let me ask you, let me just jump out of here. First of all, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
I didn't dress up today, but I figured it's Monday. And it's raining here in San Diego, where it never rains. Let me talk to you a little bit. When you see these attacks on Fauci, and then I hear, people, insane people nonetheless, but people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, we're going to prosecute him. And it seems to me that all goes back to that comment he had at that one time about masks. Early in 2020, he said, you don't need a mask right now. We were still trying to ascertain, just how contagious this disease was going to be. The epidemiology of it was still unclear. He wanted to save masks for professionals, that really needed them. But what's your take when you see these people calling for his subpoena and his arrest?
Well, I'd be more impressed if I didn't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene had her last science course in the 8th grade. It would probably move me a little more that she knows what she's talking about. I see noises coming from other quarters, including our distinguished senator friend Paul, but luckily he won't be in a position to do anything. Look, I'm not sure that they really want to go after Fauci because of his shift on masks. And as you said, Chip, it wasn't a shift. We didn't have masks, so he gave them to people who worked in nursing homes and hospitals. And so would have I. And that's not prosecutable. It's sensible.
You remember this, Doc? They were going to construction sites trying to get them from people who work with asbestos, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have them.
We didn't have them. So you had to triage, and they triaged the appropriate way. And I would probably say, good on you, not going to indict you. Where I think they're going to try to come after him is, didn't all this originate as military research in some Chinese lab? And you covered it up, Dr. Fauci, which is, again, nonsense. By
the way, there is zero evidence.
I think that's a little strong. There might be minus evidence. I mean, there's no evidence
whatsoever.
But that's part of the sort of far-right conspiracy of protecting people in China. Tony Fauci doesn't need to protect anyone in China. He doesn't care.
He doesn't have stock in Moderna or Pfizer or
he's a straight shooter. He's been willing to buck trends going all the way back to fighting HIV when no one was willing to talk about it, and he was. So there's that. And then I think there's some notion that he told us to go get vaccines that weren't safe. This also is complete nonsense. The vaccines are safe. Of course, we should be vaccinated. If you want to indict someone, go out and indict all the disinformers, including Musk, who've been dumping on vaccines on social media when we had 1 million preventable deaths.
Yeah.
1 million. Are you kidding me? You're going to go after? No, I love Fauci. I know Fauci. He's brilliant. He's one of the scientific giants of COVID and immunology more generally. He'll take care of himself. I'm not worried that these dingbats are going to somehow.
I know, but it pisses me off.
Well, it's like a show trial. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really does. I was listening to a podcast talking about goiters. That's funny. For people that don't know, if you don't have enough iodine in your diet, you can get these things. And they were seeing them in the Midwest because there was no sea. I mean, there was no fish they could eat that, and the fish naturally have iodine because the water collects it. And anyway, by
the way, it's why we have iodized salt.
Well, I was going to get to that. Yeah. So what happened was they went to Cleveland, and Cleveland had a lot of this about 100 years ago. And they said, look, we want to do this. We want to put iodine in your salt because we're trying to figure a way that we could get it into people's lives, because they wouldn't take but no, this is before the salt. They wanted to give it to the kids.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And Cleveland said no. Akron said yes. And Akron actually had this tremendous drop. In literally weeks, you could see the goiters go down, and it was thyroid conditions.
Yes.
I guess my point is that so when they found a way to put it in something that people could get instead of like drinking this little weird cup with this iodine in it, they put it in salt. So now you see iodized salt when you get it, and it makes a big difference. It saved a lot of lives. So I would say it's up there with one of the top 10 public health, quote unquote, miracles we've ever had. Right? It really worked. And they talked about it in this podcast about the idea of, if we could maybe if people could have a nasal spray for the COVID-19 vaccine, right?
We will someday. Yes.
Yeah, we just right now we're dealing with people that just aren't that bright. And Elon Musk, who was a billionaire, but who I sense has some psychological issues. Again, I'm not a physician, but I can read. And he doesn't seem the fact that he'd say I have 2 words and prosecute Fauci. It just adds.
It's absurd.
It is absurd.
By the way, I left Twitter.
Really?
It's like it for me. I'm done with this malarkey, and I don't know why we would support an owner who's spreading disinformation and calling for the prosecution of one of the world's leading scientists, one of the most reputable, honorable, moral people that's out there. It's beneath contempt, and I don't think people should, be on that service. I'm hoping that someone will come out with another one. There isn't really an alternate yet, although I know people are trying very hard to develop it. But Musk, he's been out there saying, let's bring back all the Nazi Twitterers and let's make sure we have free speech for every nut, kook, and lunatic. He costs us lives. He does harm. It's not just a matter of opinion. And very few are willing to do what we're doing, which is to hold him to account. He ought to be accountable for the malarkey. Sorry, Joe Biden, for the malarkey he spreads.
Malarkey. I think though that one of the things that hurts and it bothers me the most is that we seem to be going backwards. We have all this education and ability to learn at our fingertips. But we find we search for information that validates our fears instead of makes us, confront them.
Two things on this. One, we have really underspent on science education in our schools. Our schools have gotten poor. I keep reading that due to COVID and the failure to do a good job with homeschooling and Zoom teaching, that a lot of Americans have fallen behind kids in their schooling. I don't know why we're not instituting a program, by the way, to bring them all back up to speed. We're just going to say, oh, well, you lost a year, too bad. But the whole population is undereducated about science. So when we get into forums like Twitter and people are saying, well, my opinion as a former part-time exterminator in Columbus, Ohio, is that the immunology of COVID viruses is poorly understood. Wait a minute. This is an expert area. This is not an area where we just all hold opinions and say Art Kaplan's a dope because he doesn't make, sense. Okay, we can all have an opinion about that. But this notion that science is somehow a democracy and we resolve questions by popular opinion, it's
absurd. But yeah, all right. So I mean, I get, the fact that you've jumped off of Twitter. You're joining a lot of people who I think just realize that this is not going to get better. This is going to continue.
And let me ask you a question. What is the point? So I'm talking to people that tend to agree with me. I've never seen anybody show up on Twitter and say, you know what? That was a pretty persuasive argument. I'm changing my mind. I mean, it's like a echo chamber. People who are like-minded sort of cross swords. They don't really debate. They send short messages saying you're a dope or I don't care about science or whatever.
Let me defend it. And as we move into this next topic, I think it's important. The idea that social media has been such a horrible thing for humanity. I would say there are definitely downsides to it, and we'll talk about that with kids in a few minutes about what Instagram and these body shaming and things. But on the other side is that I think that I've learned a lot in the last 20 years and had access to information that I would not have, and I've met very bright people. You're a good example. I mean, we probably would have met without social media, but I don't know, maybe not. And so I think it's like anything. It's like you can drink too much water. You can drown.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. But look, you can have social media with minimal standards. You don't have to have a site that says, and now for the Nazi point of view, here's the Sturmer. I mean, and these guys get away with that. Our Facebook friend Zuckerberg does too, by saying, well, I'm just a carrier. I'm just,
right.
I'm not responsible. What nonsense is that? Of course you're responsible. This is the new age of publishing. So I'm not saying I kind of agree with you weirdly. All social media isn't terrible. I kind of know what's going on with my family and my former students because I see them on Facebook because no one under 40 is there, but okay. We can at least catch up with the old timers and that's fun and it's not bad, but we can do better, I guess is what I'm saying. We shouldn't have just a cesspool of social media.
I think, when we, first of all, just the actual phrase itself is a little bit difficult, right? I mean, when we try to define it, you got Facebook, you got Instagram, which, and TikTok. I mean, I go on TikTok and I swear to God, and it's just, the algorithm's amazing, right? So you go on there and there'll be a lot of like 30-year-old housewives or moms or something dancing, innocent, having fun. And then you can easily fall into where these girls that are 23 that have these pages where you'll go and they'll get naked for you. Right? Yeah. It's not prostitution. It's just the way these young people are doing things. Right. But then again, if I go down the science channel, and there's some great astrophysicists on TikTok, which sounds crazy considering what I just said, right?
And they'll get naked for you too for a price.
Well, we're talking to Dr. Art Kaplan from the New York University Langone Medical Center Division of Bioethics. But let's talk about young kids and the dangers they face. This is horrible. I don't know the details of Ted Cruz's daughter, and I certainly don't like the man, but I do have a lot of empathy for anybody that has a child going through that. Where are we trying to understand what that does to the mind?
Yeah, so a few studies are beginning to emerge that show that peer pressure, being harangued, being mobbed, being targeted by the kind of stuff that you and I grew up with, Chip, in high school. It wasn't like people didn't bully and pick on people, but now it's an organized, sustained, intense campaign because you can do it through social media.
Yeah.
Everybody in the school knows what's going on.
When we were kids, there was one bully or maybe two. Yeah. Today, you get about a third of a bullies, and they all get together in a group of 6.
Exactly. And we know that that's worse. It's just worse for kids. And, you see
they're weak. That's the reason they're doing it.
Sure. They pick on the weakest member, and that's what a bully does. And you also see it with people who are, if you will, they're trying to develop their opinions. I don't know what stupid things I said from grade 5 to high school. I'm sure it's a long list and somebody could greatly embarrass me by finding all of them. But now all your views are memorialized, amplified. You try out some idea, which I'm in favor of. I'm not trying to censor people, and, they can experiment around with different ideas or thoughts about their sexuality or whatever it is that they want to do. but now it's all done out in public. You're accountable for it. People pick up on it. They go at you because they know you're a young person. I mean, you're not a competent adult. You're trying to form your identity. So we know from a lot of psychological studies that that's high vulnerability. I think the other thing we know is that kids are just mean. So you give them a powerful tool. They're not any meaner than they were 2 generations, 3 generations ago. They just have tools that really let them, if you will, amplify that. So we have trouble. And I don't like the answer, which is commonly given, which is, parents, you monitor what your kids do on social media. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Parents don't have a clue what's going on social media.
That's insane. You can't, there's so many different places they could be, first
Right.
of all.
Right.
I mean, I guarantee you that 90% of the people out there listening right now or watching this have never been on Twitch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you a
TikTok
quote,
for that matter.
Here's a quote from my son between the time he was maybe in the 5th grade and maybe a junior in high school. And here's what he had to say to me. I'd say, how things going? And he'd say, fine. End of story. No more. I mean, they don't talk to their parents about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Trying to be independent from their parents. I get it. But this idea that I'm going to know what he's doing, I barely knew what he was doing in my own house, much less what he was doing on social media. So that's not an answer. That means to me, more monitoring, more surveillance, more attempt to intervene, more attempt to educate kids about, the price of bullying. The suicide rates for young people up tremendously. We know you could tell them about Ted Cruz's daughter, but I mean, there's plenty of those.
Oh, there's many of
rattling
those,
around
yeah.
too.
But I guess, conservatives are going to say, this starts in the house. The parents, have to control this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, though, that horse is way out of the
Way
barn.
out of the barn. Too late.
Yeah. And young people today, a 12-year-old girl, right, is not like a 12-year-old girl 40 years ago.
Who had anybody from 3,000 miles away stalking them as a 12-year-old girl? I'm not going to say there weren't bad guys around, but they were in town. And probably your parents did know who they were. And that's not the situation today. There could be somebody bothering you, pestering you, catfishing you from another country. That never existed before.
And you mentioned catfish. Remember that Notre Dame football player?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Actually, a neighbor of mine is a good friend of his, and I said, "How is he doing?" He says, "Good, but it's never going to leave him.
Yeah,
always going to follow him." And,
yeah. And again, these are situations. They just didn't exist before. So to say, well, it all starts in the home and with good parenting and monitoring. I'm not against good parenting and I'm not against monitoring, but this is not the world that is just up to parental efforts. We've got to do more.
By the way, if you're watching this or listening, appreciate it. But follow me on YouTube at Chip Franklin. And this is an interesting piece here. Chris writes, 60 Minutes had a piece on parents that lost children to suicide, suing social media companies. And I don't have a degree in copyright and trademark law, but I do know that it's hard to find, how they actually did that. I mean,
you need a line of causation. I know that. It's tough.
You remember the kid that talked the other kid into jumping off a bridge?
Yes.
Right. And actually went to prison for it.
Yes.
And
there was a case like that at MIT where a student sort of persuaded another student to kill himself. I think it was an ex-girlfriend or something like that. And that one did go to trial. But even there, I don't think the punishment was very severe. It's tough to prove it. On the other hand, look, I'm not against symbolic lawsuits. Even torturing the media company to come out and say, defend yourself, and you have to defend what happened here. Even if you lose, you kind of make a point. What's their internal mechanisms? Didn't Musk fire his entire monitoring service from Twitter?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, that's why now you have a good friend of mine, Rex Chapman. You might have seen him on Twitter.
I know Rex, yeah.
There's like 40 accounts pretending to be him saying horrible things, you know? And in the past, they would get rid of those, but they're apparently going to keep them. And it's just a matter of time before they come after all of us.
Let me mention something else in this mental health sphere. I think we could use more monitoring of mental health in the schools. And it makes people very nervous to find out we do eye exams and ear exams, but I think we could do some basic mental health screening. Kids aren't necessarily going to come forward if they have issues or even know what to do. So I am in favor of doing more school-based, monitoring of mental health of kids looking for problems. But we also have to spend more money on mental health treatment, mental health personnel. If you had a kid in trouble right now, I don't know if you hear this, Chip, but what I hear is my kid has a problem. They're depressed or whatever they are. And the next appointment to see somebody is about a year and a half. Whoa, come on.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, I mean, obviously, mental health professionals are overwhelmed as well, right?
Yes. Completely. So we spent a lot of money building up the physical part of medicine. If you had a heart attack, you're going to get treatment that's pretty good almost anywhere in the country that I can think of. Mental health crisis, good luck.
Yeah, and I think that so much of this, I hear people go all the way back to the late 80s when Reagan, under pressure from a lot of different groups, opened up mental health facilities, put them out on the street, people that were housed. And of course, we see now the homeless numbers through the roof. I mean, I know we're kind of trying, all over the place here, but when you look at social media and young people and their susceptibility, obviously at that age, when you're going through adolescence and you're, all these changes are happening in your life. And many of them are these kids are with one parent, so they spend a lot of time on their own and on social media.
Sure.
I mean, if you stop and you look at it,
a lot of kids spend an enormous amount of time alone at home by themselves because both parents are at work.
Yeah, I mean, I was a latchkey kid.
Yeah,
I was a latchkey kid, and I got into some trouble. But I can only imagine, how it would have been amped with social media.
Yeah.
So what should we do? I mean, as a physician, obviously, you talk about you created a division of bioethics at New York University. Where are the ethics? Where are these people in social media? We hear, Elizabeth Warren and others have come forward and, called for some sort of either breaking up these companies, but I don't think she did it with this in mind. I think she just thought they were too powerful. And, like you said before, they're in a sense publishers, and there should be some responsibility for what goes on their platform when they open it up. But there's so much money coming in. They figured that the lawsuits would be a fraction of what they'd earn. Yeah, it's kind of like the old car manufacturers. We're not going to fix the car.
Like your industrial polluter. Okay, I'll pay the fine. I'm not going to stop polluting. I'll just eat the fines. I'm going to say three things to do. One, let's start pulling some of the stigma out of mental health. It's different kind of illness, different kind of disease, but it's just illness and disease, human frailty. We don't have to get all worked up that it's character failure or some kind of culpable human disaster. It's just a different type of stress on the body that produces problems. Could we start to really, in the media, elsewhere, treat it as just another type of illness and disease? Second, more screening in the schools for kids in trouble. Let's get those programs in there and then try to build some paths to some form of treatment, even if it's just on the internet. Use it. I mean, use social media. If there's no psychologist, social worker in your town, then let's get them on where there are people, and let's build that up. That's part of the stigma problem, Chip. We don't do it because people are afraid to have their kid identified as having a mental illness. If the kid had liver disease, they'd say, great, go screen him in school and get him in. And then lastly, can't we at least ask these publishers of the internet, the Musks of the world, you have to have transparency as a publisher. Regulate them like a public utility. Make them accountable, transparent, have to have hearings, have to explain what they do. They're gigantic. To me, they're utilities. They're not private enterprise. They're, as I say, it's like the electric company. You want to raise the rates, at least you have to have a hearing and explain what you're doing. Trump wants to open the doors to every football nut and bigot, and there are quite a number of those up there on Twitter. Then at least be transparent, have a meeting that's public, not just to the stockholders or to him in that case.
It's, I feel like Sisyphus sometimes, right? That we get close to some of these solutions, but then we're right back at the bottom of the hill. I don't see the kind of legislation you're talking about coming forward anytime soon. I know, again, when you look at as horrible as what had happened to Ted Cruz, it makes me hope that maybe conservatives we'll start to look at this and understand that this is a problem. If your kids are grown and they're in their 30s and 40s, and many of these guys are in their 70s and 80s, and their kids are grown, or late 60s and 70s. But I think the next generation, the Adam Kinzingers that are coming up in here, they're going to look at this and say something needs to be done. You hope it, you hope they see that, right? But
I do. I'm with you. I'm not sure it's going to happen next month, even in the coming year. There is a resistance to meddling around with free speech. And let's not kid ourselves. These big social media companies, they got the lobbyists too. It reminds me of the pharmaceutical industry. We've been living with ridiculous prices for as long as you and I have been alive, probably. They rip us off. They don't charge the same amounts in foreign countries. They just do it to us because we're dopey enough to put up with it. And we don't fix it. It just sort of slides along. And it's partly because they have such lobbying influence, spend so much influence, so much to influence our legislators that nothing changes. And I worry, you look at the size of these social media companies, are we really going to be able to get them?
I feel like this is almost like the Industrial Revolution with Carnegie and Rockefeller and the others. They had so much power and so much control that again, they were doing great things, but at the same time, there were consequences.
Yeah, building a railroad was great. Having slave labor do it, probably not so good.
Killing Chinese to build a railroad. Throwing them in tunnels. Yeah, you're right. Doc, always great to see you, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay. See you, pal. Again, Dr. Art Kaplan. He created the Division of Bioethics at New York University's Langone Medical Center, and just always been a good friend to me, and very nice to come on the show. Boy, there's a lot going on. There's an interesting story. I don't know if you guys saw today, Janet Yellen talking about that the recession is not going to be quite as bad. Let me run this a couple of these by, and we'll get to our next guest in a second. She's saying inflation will be much lower. And I've been talking to people about this, and I really do agree. She was interviewed. She was on 60 Minutes last night. And she says, while inflation right now is at a 40-year high, although, you still got to remember what came right before that. If you were alive in the late 70s, inflation was, 17, 18, 19%. A car loan was like 19%. It was insane. No, I'm sorry. The interest rate was that high. The inflation wasn't 17 or 18%, but nonetheless, it was. We were in the middle of a recession and inflation. Anyway, so the former head of the Fed, Janet Yellen, and now the Secretary of the Treasury, she's basically the country's CFO, right? She says she's doing everything in her power to avoid this, and believes that what the U.S. central bank has done, setting American interest rates, is good. And she, more than most people, understands that balance. And we'll find out moving forward. But that was a scary thing about, again, not to just go after Trump again, but I should, is that Trump had no idea about macroeconomics, never did. Janet Yellen said that back when she was head of the Fed. She actually said that this guy doesn't understand it, and she had to break it down for him. Again, if you have a micro version of a macro problem, you can create a lot more difficulties than what you're currently in. All right. Brittany Griner is back. Yet it's not over for her. She's had a very difficult run. She's been in Russian custody for almost 3 years. I didn't realize it'd been that long. I'm sorry. Trevor Reed had been. I'm reading a different article. I'm sorry. She'd been 300 days, not 3 years. Anyway, but Griner, who was both a star in the WNBA and also gay, had a woman as her partner, was tossed around as a political football for quite a while between both sides. When she was arrested going into Russia with this cannabis, and it did have THC. It wasn't just it has a slight amount of THC. Anyway, it was sad to see her become part of this pawn, and it was part of the invasion of Ukraine and the aftermath, obviously the situation between the U.S. and Russia, which, if you're anywhere near my age, and hopefully you're not, it was a tough period of time. So what's going to happen as she moves forward? And that's a tough question. I mean, and I the whole PTSD thing, we talk about that, but I don't think most people really understand what it's like. If you've never known anybody with PTSD, I had a buddy, a guy I used to play music with, who was had been in Vietnam, and so he was about 5 years older than me, And to this day, you can't hear helicopters without getting anxiety. And you'd think, it's been 50 years since he was there, 48 years or whatever it was. But that's at the heart of this. So joining us right now is an expert in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, Jay Joshi. I guess I get your name right, Jay. I hope I did. Jay, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Chip. Thanks for having me.
So what is, first of all, let's explain a little bit what PTSD is for people.
Well, so PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's break it down.
And it's had different names over the years, right? I mean, from shell shock to, I mean, I'm missing others I know over time though. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupt you.
Yeah, no, right. Different names, and and I'm glad you're talking about it, because we're still finding that even today, just like the example you gave, I mean, even today, people still think that this is a made-up disorder. I mean, I've seen it even on sitcoms and comedy routines, right, where they're making fun of PTSD. And here's the thing: it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's not only a real thing, but it is a protective mechanism. So we were designed through evolution to develop PTSD, anxiety, right?
Really?
These are protective mechanisms. So let's talk about exactly what that is. So post-traumatic. So there's a trauma, and most people relate that trauma to war. So the example you gave, maybe it was Vietnam, or maybe it was another type of war, and those soldiers have seen atrocities. They have seen things that no human should see, and it is deeply troubling, is deeply disturbing, and there is a ton of regret. Usually associated with that. Regret that they didn't do enough, maybe survival guilt regret that the war even happened, et cetera, right? But there was a trauma. There was some type of traumatic event. That's the kind of the one word, if you will, post-traumatic. It's kind of hyphenated as one word. Next is stress. It induces a lot of stress hormones, a lot of stress mentally. And then the final word disorder. That's, if anything, that's the only word that maybe we should debate. Is it a disorder, or is it something that is, a natural evolutionary process? I think it's a natural evolutionary process. I think the fact that they put disorder in there makes it seem like the person is messed up, right? There's something wrong with that person, and that person shouldn't be feeling this way. And I think that's, if anything, the stigma comes from the fact that we have this disorder, if you will, defined incorrectly. Maybe we
Let
should
me ask you something.
Yeah.
So you're talking about this as almost like a Nietzsche-esque sort of thing, right? It's doesn't kill us, we get stronger. Our experiences and throughout this trauma, yet we survive, but we have this this anxiety. How does that anxiety fit in our evolution, and what's the positive side of that? Because I mean,
sure. Well, the positive side to it, or the reason that this anxiety even is present: anxiety, depression, pain. Physical pain, right? Anxiety, depression are forms of mental pain. When those go unchecked, especially anxiety goes unchecked, you start developing symptoms similar to PTSD. The reason you start developing that is because your body's trying to protect you from that event and protect you from experiencing things like that, because clearly that event was very bad, right? And in some cases, especially when we're talking about war, we're talking about fatal events. So your body's trying to protect you from getting into situations like that again. Here's where it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem when it starts paralyzing your ability to function correctly. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's when, for example, the person you were talking about before, helicopters flying overhead. Or I've had patients where they say when a door shuts, it triggers them, right?
Right.
Because they think it's a bomb going off, or they think it's, it reminds them of the traumatic event. That's when this problem is no longer clinically advantageous. It's disadvantageous at that point.
Well, what's Griner going through right now? And I mean, obviously, you haven't had a chance to interview her, but she's in a Russian jail, a Spartan-like existence, to say the least, right? And not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, is that part of the anxiety of just not knowing what's going to happen?
Definitely. I mean, first of all, anyone who's been jailed is going to have a negative experience, obviously. But anyone who's been jailed in a foreign country where they don't speak the language, and in a country that's not particularly friendly right now to Americans, Of course, she's going to have a lot of anxiety. I mean, I would imagine that there were thoughts in her head that she's not going to survive this. There were probably thoughts in her head about being abused, both physically, mentally, probably even sexually abused. I don't know if any of these things happened, but I'm sure that those thoughts went through her mind because they would go through anyone's mind, right? Here's the good thing. The good thing is, at least from the preliminary reports that I have seen, and I'm seeing the same data that everyone else is seeing, she seems physically healthy. She was walking, relatively, pretty well. She was smiling at times. She was greeting people in Abu Dhabi, which was a sign of both mental and physical health. Apparently, she picked up a basketball yesterday, so she went to the basketball court. So, and her
is that what you would recommend, that people get back to their routine as quick as possible, or do they need time after this to have some sort of, therapy or rest or ability to take it all in? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody's different. Everyone's different. Everyone copes differently, but also everyone's trauma is different, and the way that they address it and their needs can be different. Here is one advantage, though, that she has. Right, she has the advantage of going there, of being a celebrity that a few people knew about, and now coming back and being almost a household name. So that can be a pro and a con, but in this case, I think it might be a pro, because here she has the ability to talk about what's going on. She has a support system that is like nothing else that you and I probably would ever have. She has the ability to get back to a routine, get back on the basketball court. I would imagine playing basketball would be hugely therapeutic physically and mentally for her, because that's her comfort zone, right? That's what keeps her happy. That's what makes her happy. That's what's made her happy her whole life. She started playing basketball at a young age, and she's very good at basketball. So in her case, I would guess that might be one of the best things to do, is to get back into your comfort zone, get back into the thing that makes you happy, and to know that this traumatic experience is behind you.
Wow. I think we're talking, by the way, to Dr. Jay Joshi. Is it Joshi or Joshi?
Joshi,
CEO and medical director of National Pain Centers. The mental pain management is hard. I mean, when people have these things that take them back, maybe a child's death or a relationship that was very difficult and ended, and is it best to block that out or to go back there? My friend with the helicopters, right? He's seen almost all Army doctors, right? And then he went outside, and there was a woman who was in her late 70s, and he got him to talk more about what happened there, as opposed to these doctors who were trying to treat the symptoms instead of trying to get to the root of that. When you're talking about somebody with, PTSD, and let's leave the D off, that kind of anxiety, is it different for everybody else, or do you have to really face what happened to you and deal with it that way?
Yeah, I think everyone's different, so we want to make sure that we put that statement out there from the get-go, right? That everyone is different. But in my experience, I think going to the root of the problem is always the best way to handle it. And some people may take more time than other people. Some people, you may have to approach it differently than other people, but getting to the root problem is definitely the way that you want to address the problem. I will say that there are also generational differences. The baby boomer generation has been a little tougher nut to crack in the sense of getting to the root of the problem. They've been a lot more stoic, a lot more reserved. The younger generation.
Is that cultural too, though, Doc? I mean,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. It can be cultural as well. So, generational, cultural, right? Some people are just much more reserved, and like you were talking about before, some people, there has been a stigma to mental health. If you, especially as a man, if you admit that there's something bothering you mentally, in the past you were. And maybe even still now, people would perceive you as weak, and you don't want to have that perception that you're weak. So that nut's been tough to crack. But the younger generations, we've been finding, especially if they trust you, they've been a lot more open about talking about their feelings. And as you were talking about before too, they're so open that they'll talk about their feelings on social media and blast it to the whole world like an open book, right? So they talk about exactly what's bothering them and what's triggering them. So there are definitely different ways that different generations and different cultures, approach their problems and how they want to talk about mental health issues.
Yeah. I guess with Brittany though, when I again, having two superpowers hanging in the balance, I don't know how much she was aware of that, but she's smart. She seemed like a pretty smart kid. And that when she was in prison, that she probably had the realization that she might spend the rest of her life there, especially if in fact, this thing, if NATO got involved, I mean, all those things had to go through her mind. Does it also apply? What about her family? I mean, can you get PTSD if you are somebody that's not in the middle of that, but are experiencing it tangentially through someone you love?
Yeah, it absolutely. I'm so happy you asked that question. I would say the biggest thing that gets missed when we talk about mental health, it's not the patient. The patient, yes, the patient gets missed sometimes, and honestly, insurance is a nightmare. We won't even get into that right now because there's not enough time to talk about the insurance coverage for treatments, right? It's awful. But here's the one thing that people don't talk about is what about the family members, the people going, who are experiencing it but not going through it directly. I mean, we'll take death, right? Death of a family member, right? Those can be incredibly depressing, incredibly traumatic events. And we focus on the person who's going through the illness, the person who's dying. But what about the family members who are experiencing it, the family members who are suffering it? A lot of people ignore the family members. And, in fact, a lot of family members are caretakers, for example. So they're completely ignored. Their physical health and their mental health is completely ignored. And it shouldn't be. We should give just as much priority to the caregivers and the immediate family members as we are to the patients, because they're all going through it as a unit, assuming that it is a family unit. They're all going through it together.
Well, and I think too, just the idea of losing somebody that's right in the same room with you. In other words, they're gone in a way that, I remember when, my sister's boyfriend came back from Vietnam. I was a little kid, real little, but I heard stories later on, just how his interpersonal relationships just fell apart. Right. And, it's happening in plain sight all around us now. I think about school shootings, right? So you don't have to be in a school to experience the terror of imagining what it would be like if somebody came in and started killing kids, So children see this over a period of time. Can you even recognize PTSD in children? I was talking earlier with Dr. Kaplan about social media and its effects on young people. We all know that there's something going on there. We don't know just how bad it's going to be, but the bottom line is we're not really doing anything to correct it. A generational PTSD moving forward seems to me a bad recipe for any society. I've been doing talk radio for like about 30 years, right? I bet I've talked about this 5 or 6 times, really. And I just wonder what are the societal symptoms of something like this when it goes unchecked.
Yeah, well, social media is the biggest mental health experiment ever in the history of humanity.
Right.
And I don't know if that experiment's going very well, by the way.
No, I would say no. I think that's a pretty safe guess.
I would say probably the same thing. And you see, with war, or with experiences that maybe Brittany Griner had, or someone in her position, right? These are very definitive, very extreme experiences. With social media, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, every day you're getting a tweet and it's triggering you a little. Every day you're hearing something where someone didn't like what you posted, and you hear that over and over and over and over, and before you know it, and this is almost like an elusive problem, because you don't know exactly when that person, that kid, became irreparably harmed, and then you wake up one day and they do something absolutely awful, or they say something or do something that's just, and you're just like, what happened? Where did this come from? It's been building up to the point where you reach the breaking point, you get to a point of no return, and now they're you know they're the same way that the soldier is when they return back from a war, from an incident that they saw. But again, with that person, it was a very solitary, extreme incident. With that kid, it was just pounding every single day, pounding hate messages, or you're ugly, or you stink, or whatever the case may be. That's the problem. I mean, that's the problem with social media. Now, on one hand, you could say, it's healthy that we're having a discussion on social media, and and that's fine in a sense that, these people are going to be thinking this whether it's on social media or not on social media. So, I guess it's good you're having a discussion, but should that discussion be filled with hate and anger and animosity, or should the discussion be actually a discussion?
Well, to that point, Doc, when it was revealed that Ted Cruz's daughter had attempted suicide, I think I saw everybody pull back for a second, and they say, at least on my side of the aisle, political aisle, and they said, I hate this guy, but I'm empathetic entirely here, and I see pictures and I think about that. And I have a personal experience in my own family with a niece, and it's just been unbelievable. I mean, to see it happen right at somewhere, 12 or 13 years old. She had a friend that killed herself, took some, I think some Adderall that happened to have fentanyl in it or something along these lines. And, and that can create just an incredible wave of I almost want to say like she's lost, not literally lost, because, there's been therapy and stuff, but you're talking, it happened to a friend of mine in my family who happens to have a lot of money and has spent close to $500,000 in 4 years. And now she's turning 18. And you go, well, crap, what the hell now? What do I do now? She's an adult, and I have absolutely no, maybe, I know this, but there is no silver bullet here, right? There's just a million possible outcomes in all these. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And this is why it's so important, especially in kids. Think of kids like, I always sort of give this example. I kind of think of all of us as computer systems, operating systems, right? When we're kids, our operating system is being programmed. And if we misprogram it, it is incredibly hard to have a so-called normal mental health or normal life. It is so imperative that we program those kids correctly with healthy thoughts and with peace, because it is very hard to find mental peace and mental health once they've been misprogrammed. And so to have those attempted suicides, to have those negative thoughts at the age 12, 13, that's going to be there to some element forever. And what really sort of saddens me is, and I heard, I read about this too, and what saddens me is, her father comes out there and says everything's fine. This was not an attempted suicide. This was no big deal. Basically, he brushes it off.
Yeah.
What's that telling the kid? The kid sees this, right? And they're gonna see in their own mind, they're gonna be like, I'm not getting supported, right, by my own.
Well, it's what
parents.
you said earlier, and I think maybe Dr. Kaplan said too. There's, especially maybe it's as this person Nick says here, maybe it has something to do with the Y chromosome. Maybe men are not really equipped to. Ironically, we're the ones in many cases that face a lot of this PTSD through, either the military or law enforcement or first responders kind of thing. And I think that there's a part of this that makes me really, really sad that as you said, and when I heard he said that, it was really, you don't have to say anything, dude. You could just have been quiet and had a conversation with your daughter. You don't have to address it. You don't have to, by turning it into another issue. Jay, thank you so much for your time. Will you come back? I'd love to talk to you again about this. It's just killing. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully, like you said, getting Brittany back to a normal life. Brittany Griner can lead a normal life moving forward. We'll have to keep our fingers crossed there, I guess. All right. Take care, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, Dr. Jay Joshi, MD, specializes in PTSD, and just I can't even freaking imagine what goes on through the minds of these kids after these school shootings. And you got to speak to David Hogg from Parkland, the Parkland shooting, and And he's, he still suffers a little bit of this PTSD, All right. Joining us right now, the one and only Nikki Maduro and Mark Thompson.
Hi.
Hello,
Hey,
kids.
What's up?
I didn't dress up today, man. I didn't wear hey, good luck. Your 49ers did great.
Nice.
Yeah, buddy. Totally stoked. I'm very,
Yeah,
very happy about that.
We'll see the kid, man. That kid looked like he was 12. That Birdie, the quarterback.
Purdy's unreal. I mean, they call him Mr. Irrelevant because he was the last guy chosen in the draft, but he's having this, I think it's this storybook kind of. Look, they had this Trey Lance guy, or Chip, I don't know how close. Oh, shoot, my whole. Oh, that didn't go well. Oh, my God. Well, anyway,
I gotta let you go because
I'm telling you, Chip, this is nothing. I have these technical issues every single time that I'm supposed to join you. I love you all. Have a great day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang in there, bud.
You'll hear some extraneous noises. You may want to take me out of the stream because
I will take you out right now, my
Thank
friend. All right. If you're just listening to this, Mark's whole system just fell on top of him. Oh my God.
See, we had an earthquake not too long ago, like a month ago, and I thought something like that was going to happen. You're going to have to forgive me. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. I don't have COVID, but I swear to God, I can't kick this cold. But that was the best video ever. And, anyways, I'll fill in.
By the way, Mark's show kicks off in about 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
6 minutes
on YouTube.
So anyways, I will say what Mark was going to say, which is it's not just a Purdy that's having the storybook. It's the Niners, man. I mean, one Jimmy Garoppolo deciding to stay with the Niners after all of that last season. I mean, the guy got us to the not the championship game, the divisional game. And we still were like, nope, sorry, bye. He sucks it up, becomes our second string quarterback. Trey Lance gets injured so early. Jimmy steps in, kicks butt, then he gets injured. And now Purdy, all of a sudden, Mr. Irrelevant is like, he beats Tom Brady in his first starting game. Are you kidding me? It was amazing.
And as you know, I'm from Washington, D.C. originally, and I'm a Commanders fan. And that we play you guys in 2 weeks. So we'll see. We'll have our own little bet.
We'll come up with like this season has been amazing, and so I had to rock my Niners gear. I wanted to find my black one, but I had to find this one.
Well, I mean, it was fun. I was actually rooting for you guys. I saw Brady's dad up there. You remember? Were you with me when Brady's dad called that time or no?
I was working at the station. I wasn't on air with you at the time.
For people who don't know the story, I was. It was back during the Inflategate. Remember that he wanted the footballs deflated a little bit because they're easier to hold and throw, and we were talking about it, and I was, and he said apparently he had gotten text messages to the kid. He wanted him to do this. And so all of a sudden his phone disappeared. He said, I threw my phone away. And I was saying, come on. And his dad, Brady's father, called me, and he was just ripping into me. And, I mean, I was taking it to a certain extent, but I kept saying, hey, who throws their phone away? He goes, my son does. And I go, yeah, but I mean, it doesn't seem like a little bit of
suspicious, right?
A little suspicious. And so, to this day, I mean, first of all, there was a New England radio station that played the interview, and I must have got 10,000 tweets telling me how I can go screw myself and more colorful language.
Of course.
Oh yeah. But it was great. I mean, it was, it's like one of those kind of moments. I was the one that actually, after the interview, I edited it and I sent it out, and it took off. And, and then if you put in Tom Brady, Chip Franklin in Google, you'll read how the father destroyed me. But whatever.
You have your own moment with the Bradys. I'm sure
there's always that thing. When I had Martin O'Malley, who ran for president, remember the Democrat? He once came into a studio and threatened to kick my ass back when I was in Baltimore. He was mayor of Baltimore, and he literally said it on air. He goes, "Oh, like that, come outside and I'll kick your ass." And next night I was on the O'Reilly Factor and everything. Well, that story over years now, so they'll introduce him to groups, and I was a little more conservative then maybe than I am now. I didn't really see the light. But he now the story is that he did kick my ass. So it's actually grown into a story where he shoved me and he held me up to the wall, and
I just love stories like that. They take on a life of their own. So
yeah. Whatever. What do you got going on today?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Niners. We're going to talk about Elon Musk's auction, which is hilarious. I have a warning for people that I just went through this whole machination of. If you're going to buy like Visa gift cards this holiday season, there is one specific one that you should not buy. And so I'll get into that because we thought we got scammed, but I'll explain that. I don't know. We have a bunch of stuff coming up. We'll see how long my voice lasts. I don't know what's going on with me, but something is. So we'll see.
That sucks.
I know. I mean, it's slowly going out. You know what it's like for people that talk all the time. I'm sensing the mouse in the wheel is gonna like blow its load. I don't think I could say that on there, but it's fine.
Well, I just want to remind everybody to watch Nikki and to subscribe both to her and my channel, as well as Mark Thompson. And as we grow this thing, it's still in its infancy, but we're all having a good time doing it too, right?
We are.
All right.
Exactly.
All right, bad girl. We'll talk to you later on.
Bye,
the one and only Nikki Medoro, Medoro. Yeah. All right, I got to go. You guys, thank you so much. You can get all of these. You can see some previous ones coming up this week, a little bit later on. Comedian Judy Gold will join us. Danny Baldwin, if you know Danny, he'll be with us a little bit later on in this week. And as we go through, obviously, we'll keep an eye on all the news. And we get, we might even bring in some Santa Claus might actually make a visit. How about that? How about them taters? Get really Santa Claus? Yeah, anyway. All right. Again, you can please subscribe if you're here. And you can also follow me at whatthefranklin.com or chipfranklin.com, or, just type my name in Google, baby. We'll see you tomorrow.
I can handle things.
We shall overcome. Yes, we can.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
What the f*** is wrong with you?